Olá, pessoal, bem-vindos de volta ao Case Startup Summit 2020. E agora eu vou conversar com vocês sobre um assunto que é muito próximo ao meu coração, que é como construir e manter uma comunidade baseada num modelo de negócio em comum. E eu trouxe aqui ninguém mais, ninguém menos para falar de um assunto tão importante, Alexandre Tellman, CEO da SaaStock.
How's it going?
Good. Então, pessoal, agora eu vou ligar até para o WhatsApp, começar a conversar em inglês. E welcome on board, Alexander. How are you?
Yeah, great, great. Really excited to be here at the Case Startup Summit. My third conference in Brazil that I've spoken at, but the first time online.
I guess you're going to be the first of many, right? I think we'll talk about this. You probably more than anyone else knows like what is the future for conferences.
Yeah.
So I think a good way to start, just giving a little of context for everybody, why bringing someone from the conference universe to talk about community. Can you give us a little bit of a background, like from SaaStock, whoever doesn't know about the project, and your business model and what the things you guys have been going through that might be turning the community into a much more important part of your business.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I guess the first SaaStock, and SaaStock started as a conference to bring the European SaaS community together in 2016. Before that, I'd been working on the idea for a year, but I kind of fell into the idea because I was doing a blog and then a podcast and then some local meetups. And what I realized is that I developed and I built a community over the space of 12 months. And actually it was the blog, it was the podcast, it was the local meetups, it was a Slack channel for SaaS founders. And then I was having conversations with everybody that was involved in that community. That led to the idea of creating a conference in Europe for European, B2B SaaS founders. So we ran the first SaaStock conference in 2016 in Dublin. And whilst I kind of positioned it as an event, a community event for European SaaS founders, people from all over the world traveled to it. So people from Brazil, founders from India, founders from Australia. So it became very global from the get-go in terms of the need. And back then in 2016, there was really only 2 kind of SaaS conferences globally annually. So there was this need for SaaS founders and execs to come together to learn from one another. And effectively, I'd put on an event where people could do that. So I just facilitated that. And then we've grown SaaStock since then, since 2016, to running last year 5 in-person conferences in 5 continents. So we took the event in Dublin, we took that sort of the model, cookie cutted that, and put one in North America. We've done, did one in Latin America, in Brazil. We had one in Australia. We had one in Asia, and obviously the European one. And we've continued to write content. We've for that time to have like online community. This year, as kind of COVID, and the pandemic has hit everybody kind of globally. We then had to look at what we were doing and bring as much of our value online as possible. And we sort of pivoted to doing online conferences and working much more with our community. To develop where we can bring our value 365 days a year online. So a very interesting moment for us, and I can share a lot about how we've moved online, what else we're doing to bring the community together, what we're seeing, and so on. But effectively, with our conferences, with our community, with our content, we're trying to bring SaaS founders together. To make a real difference, to them, and to the lives of them and their companies.
Well, that's so interesting. I see some similarities with our story, where it's hard to say what came first, like was the community or the business model. In your case, it even looks like the the community came first, and then out of the community emerged the idea and then the requirement. And for us as well, like when we started the project, we didn't even thought that we were going to build a business around it until the community around the project was so big that for us made almost like a no-brainer. Say, okay, there is a demand that is much higher than we expected for this product, and the community demanded almost a company to emerge to take this to the next level. And this for us shaped so much of how our company operates. So I wonder, in your case, how much the community shaped how the company works, and how much your company is a reflection of this engagement with the community, and what is the feedback loop that creates between community and business, and community and business, like how they continue to shape your business to this day?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think from we start perhaps with the people, right? And I hire community builders and people that are interested in startups, or more than interested, like passionate, about startups. And I often have a look at, where have obviously they worked before? Had they been working with startups before? Was it accelerators, or did they have their own startup? And then also, like, extracurricularly, what are they doing outside? What the difficult word to say, but outside of work, how are they involved? In the community? Have they been running meetups themselves, and and so on? Have they been talking at conferences or whatever? So that's certainly something that I've looked at when the building that identity of SaaStock and getting the right sort of people in, because I think we need community builders within the company if we're building a community ourselves, right? So I think that's very key. In the first point, we start with the people. I think the second point, to what you're saying in terms of, if we look at like the feedback loops. So I inadvertently built this community first before I knew what the business model would be. It was the community that suggested to me that I build a conference, right? And so they gave me this initial feedback. And then it was the community that I was able to do the customer development with, to really kind of ask the right questions, to actually see if I was going to quit my job, because I was working full-time at that point. And if I was going to go full-time into SaaStock, I had to know to some degree, because you won't know for 100% if this is going to work. So I did my customer development work over a few months to really just understand who the customers were, what they wanted, whether if I launched this and invested my time and money into it, that we might generate some revenue and it could become a business. And so I did that, and then through that and through the grassroots activities, so starting, as I say, with the blog and the podcast and the meetups, I identified, and the customer development, I identified our first customers, the first people that bought the tickets, the first people that sponsored the events, right? And then we run the event. We had a 12-month period of effectively, it was a very small team, myself and one other person, initially for that first year. We run the event, during the event, getting real-time feedback, kind of seeing what's working. After the event, surveying the community to get feedback in terms of, like, how do we improve it? What works, what doesn't work. Don't repeat what doesn't work. Let's work on what does work. So that kind of really impacts us and the sort of direction of the type of, I guess, kind of product that we have, the type of content that we run, through pricing that we offer, and so on. So the community itself, it was such, it's an important part. I mean, without it, perhaps I would never have, created the event, which then, has led on to, the business that we are today.
Again, it's so amazing to hear it. Almost all you described, almost like you're describing an open source company. in so many ways, it's almost like you could say it's the open source conference, which all that you say would just apply to companies like Rocket.Chat, which is open source. I wonder, like, in this process, is there anything that was a big surprise for you? Like, was there any feedback or something that the community brought in that was totally not in your radar, and you're like, oh my God, like, I didn't thought about this. So amazing to have this input from such a diverse group of people all over the world, it made you shift things unexpected. Is there any case or something that you can tell us just to illustrate this?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, if I look at it, across the years, I mean, certainly the first or some of the key learnings and feedback that I had, that from the first event, we had a lot of feedback sort of in real time that actually the event was better than a lot of people expected. And that it looked like that I'd spent too much money on a first time event, and they were correct in that assumption. Actually, through my inexperience, I really, I was very much focused on the sales and the marketing and the revenue, but I didn't have a real understanding of what everything costs to put on this event. And then I had a kind of, the founder's optimism that whatever it costs, we would just sell more. And that would happen. But actually, the first event ended up losing money because I did spend too much on it, and you could see that I'd spent too much on it, at the event, and so people kind of gave that feedback. I think subsequently, across the years, we've had a lot of like interesting feedback, again, kind of real time and like post events. So, for instance, one of the things that we had at the conference was that we were in Dublin. It's like it used to be in September, is now in October, and like at lunchtimes we had this sort of like this big marquee tent outside with a DJ, with everybody was going outside. We were lucky because it was Dublin if the weather was good or not, and we brought everyone outside, and it was really good vibes, and it really created a magic kind of vibe and feel for the conference, and something, a unique kind of touch that people really liked. But the problem was, and what I hadn't necessarily kind of thought of, was that I was taking everybody out of the venue, during a peak time for our partners where they're expecting, traffic to their booths. So I was getting some polite feedback, from our partners that, hey, we don't have any content on now, but you're bringing everybody outside. And so we're not getting the traffic to the booths that we want, right? And actually, like, I made that mistake 2 years in a row. So whilst I got that kind of feedback initially, I didn't necessarily act on it straight away. And the second year, when we did that, and then I had kind of much more, well, it was still polite, but people were saying, well, look, we shouldn't necessarily be making the same mistake twice. And after that, we rectified that, and we stopped doing that, despite like it brought a real magic element to the conference, but the partners were not happy, and the partners were our customers. So we had to kind of change and act on that piece of feedback for sure. So I think that's certainly a couple of cases where we've learned through inexperience, spending too much, and also perhaps inexperience in taking people outside of where the customers kind of really need them, but then taking a bit of time to act on that feedback.
Yeah, and I think from my experience as well, like when you have something that you can really call a community around your business, it shapes the way the company is open to feedback. And although maybe in other business, if people are unhappy, they will also complain. But I think the tone, and like I said, like was a polite feedback, the tone of the feedback when you have a community, they will give feedback much earlier and much more constructive than if they just see you as a supplier, right? If they just see you as someone that a transactional relationship where they're paying for something and getting something. If you get the community to feel that they are building it, they cut you more slack when you do a mistake. They know that they can influence your behavior, and I think those are some of the key ways to identify that you truly have a community. So I've noted for me on open source, it's easy to measure in community engagement because we have GitHub, we have PR, pull requests, and people sending code and stars. What do you do on your business model to measure this community engagement, the participation, and to foster really the continued engagement with you throughout from one event to the other? Because it's a much more point in time event that happens, but for keep people engaging, you have to have a relationship that is all year round. How do you measure and how you foster it?
It's a good question. So I mean, say like initially, and like before the first conference, I was doing these SaaS meetups and doing all the grassroots stuff, and we did about 8 of those before the first event. And after the first event happened, I kind of had the question, like, what is next, right? I didn't know necessarily, kind of like initially what is next. And I was like, okay, well, let's do it again. Let's make it bigger, double the size, kind of finger in the air. Let's do double the size. But then what happens for the next 12 months? What am I going to be doing? So we thought about, well, look, we did the meetups before. We now like productized them a little bit more and kind of came up with the idea of SaaStock on tour. So effectively, I looked at, we had 34 countries represented at the first SaaStock. So I looked at the top 10 countries that were attending in terms of number of delegates. And then we decided that we would go to all 10, but we ended up doing, I think, about 8 of those countries and run a SaaStock conference and a smaller one within those countries. So that was one thing that we did, kind of we're looking at the data and looking at like how we don't want to just come back 12 months later and say, hey, here we are again, come to our event. We wanted to go to the community itself, right? And learning from that was quite expensive and a lot of hard work to do for a very small team, right, in terms of the results and the payoffs. We saw who were the kind of, I guess, the champions within each kind of market, who were really the community people, community focused people within each market, in Barcelona, in Paris, in Berlin. And those people that came to those events sort of back then were the ones that are coming back year after year to SaaStock, to the main events, right? And they're really, again, these kind of passionate people, community builders themselves. So that was very kind of interesting. Additionally, we tried to kind of keep people engaged online. Say, like initially we had this kind of Slack community, but I always had sort of challenges kind of with Slack in terms of, initially I focused it only on one persona, which was founders. And founders are very busy people. I mean, everyone's busy, kind of these days. But the founders would kind of come onto Slack. Maybe it was open all the time on the browser. And then they would post a question and maybe somebody would answer it. But in terms of activity on Slack, it was often a bit like a ghost town. But then people would come in there as and when they needed it. But it wasn't a huge amount of engagement. So we had that, and we were running, regular sort of like newsletters, sort of emails, and stuff to our community. But that's what we did in kind of in sort of year 2. In year 3, I would say we made a bit of a mistake in that we actually didn't do a lot of community engagement between conferences. So we kind of took our eye off the ball and took our eye away from where we originally came from, was these meetups and these local communities. And effectively, sort of what we did, we much more focused on scaling out the main event, but we didn't do anything really kind of community-based in that year. And I feel that it was a mistake, and I feel that it kind of reflected on the kind of the performance and the quality of that conference kind of that year. So then after that, we kind of looked at that and said, okay, well, look, meetups was where we came from. We're now in a position, as we're coming into year 4, to really kind of do more community work and bring it back to these local communities, and do it at scale. And that's when we launched SaaS.Local. Local. And SaaS.Local Local effectively are local meetups, which we're running across the world, and they run in person. But we have a local community champion who is like our city leader or our person kind of on the ground. That effectively represents SaaStock and pulls together these SaaS community events with our support, and we help them do this at scale. And within the first year of SaaS.Local, we ran, or we had 30 cities across the world that were running SaaStock events on a quarterly basis. And so we had them in Europe, we had them in the US, we managed to run one in Sao Paulo, in Australia, Hong Kong, etc. And I guess the beauty of it for us was that we didn't have to be there in person for many of these events, because our resources are finite. And for us to be, and for me to be at 30 events every quarter, it's very expensive. Travel, I'd never see my family, so we found a model that worked. And then and our plan was to scale that to 60 cities across the world this year. But again, in
Wow.
COVID unfortunately took that away from us temporarily, shall we say. We're now lucky that we're actually bringing SaaS.local back, but doing it online for the time being. So within the last month, we've run SaaS.locals in Bangalore, in Brussels. We've got one in London coming up, and Munich. And so we're starting to build this up again, but people to bring their kind of smaller communities together online. And so that's one way that we're doing that. And after each SaaS.local, we get a lot of feedback in terms of, from that community, in terms of the content and on SaaStock itself as well. We also regularly, survey our community to kind of get feedback on where we can improve. What speakers or what content did they like that we're doing? What don't they like about what we're doing? Where can we improve? Would they recommend us? So the NPS surveys as well. So we do that again after each event, and also again just in different periods of the year. We moved away from Slack because we felt that certainly at that point in time we couldn't really see the community kind of building on Slack, and thought that it might not be the right tool. And we thought that with Slack it's more difficult to get the network effect to grow that community. So we moved it onto Facebook. But still, with that, I wouldn't necessarily say it's been a huge success. I mean, there are very similar communities that are running. We're one of 4 kind of SaaS communities that are online on Facebook, and you need somebody. You need an owner of that community and somebody that is the cheerleader and the moderator and so on. And we've done that with various degrees of focus and kind of success. And we kind of feel like, the Facebook group is okay, and we do have engagement on it, but it's not really the community that right now that we really want to build. So now, as this year we've brought, we've started with our online conferences. The next phase for us and for SaaStock is really to become almost going back to where we started, right? I mean, I think throughout we've gone from being a community to being a conference business, and now we're kind of going back to being a community focused and community first business. So we're launching SaaStock Engage tomorrow, and actually bringing our community onto our own platform, and so moving a little bit away from the Facebook group. We will keep that, but we're bringing our community onto our platform. We'll run regular content on there. Workshops, AMAs, have peer-to-peer learning, networking, etc., investor matchmaking. And the question or the problem that we were trying to solve was that when we had to pivot because of COVID, the question I had in my mind was, how do we bring our value from our conference online 365 days a year? And over the last 6 months, we've been working on that. And we hope that SaaStock Engage is the answer. And we will become a community and membership based company, and moving the SaaS conference moving into a SaaS model, and being subscription first rather than transactional in terms of buying tickets here and there.
Interesting. I think that's kind of a good segue to the question that was brewing in my mind while I was hearing you talk. Because, like I said, you came from the community, then became an event company, and going back to the community. And I think a lot of people watching us right now might be asking, okay, your business, they came from the community, or almost community first, but what if I want to build a community around my business model? Like how do I start? Like how do I go about it? And then I wonder, like, since you talk to so many other like SaaS companies, I have more of a vision of other open source projects that sometimes I help. But do you ever get this question, and people who are inspired by the community you managed to create around SaaStock say, like, how they want to replicate this into other companies? And what do you usually say to them?
Yeah. It's a great question, right? And you know what I'm seeing is this big trend, you know, certainly over the last year or more, and where people are saying, you know, community is the new moat, and community is the new content, right? Or the new content marketing, right? So, you know, again, if we look at content marketing, and it's still very important for most businesses today. You know, there is this saturation of, like, you know, just there's content on everything, and people have the like limited time really to kind of read everything and devour this content. So actually, and you look at, why do people, you know, create content, right? They create it to bring people to the website, right? To you know, to buy from you effectively. I mean, you're there to kind of help people, but then to ultimately help convert them to be a customer. But one way to actually kind of do that without this kind of content creation, let's say in terms of writing content or, you know, creating audio content, is to get the community together and have this kind of you know, peer-to-peer kind of learning, you know, networking, bring that value around it, and bring the champions, you know, of your business kind of together, and let them almost do the selling for you, and have this you know, have this kind of special community. It takes time, right? If you're looking at building a community, I definitely recommend that, you know, every business should you know, look to do such a thing. You know, we're in our 5th year of building a community, right? It took 1 year for me to realize I had a community, and I didn't deliberately build one, but I just kind of, you know, it happened, right? But it doesn't happen overnight, and it's something that needs, you know, needs to be consistent. It's something you need to have an owner. You know, we have somebody in the business who leads community, you know, for SaaStock, right? And within that, they own SaaStock Local. You know, they own our Facebook group. They own our SaaStock Engage platform, which we're soon to be launching, right? So it needs an owner, and it needs the company to really be bought into that value of community. So you can't build a community overnight, right?
No.
Even if
it's not something you can just buy. Yeah.
You can't buy, and people do buy them, but they probably go away.
Yeah.
But you can't buy it. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a long game, right? Like content marketing is a long game, you know, building a podcast audience is a long game. You're building an audience, you're building, you know, an audience of champions, people that like you, like your company, like people that like your company, right? They want to be with like-minded people, right, in their tribe. And it really does take time. It takes years, not months or days. So just be prepared for that. So I think, like, definitely start to think about, what is your community strategy in your play? Do you have one? How are you going to do it? Do you have somebody in the business that can own that, and regularly, you know, whether it's weekly, daily, weekly, monthly, work on your community activities, and then have the patience, because there's no point saying, I'm going to launch a community because, you know, we said it's the new moats and it's community is the new content. And then 6 months later, you know, you see that you've only got 100 people there, and you decide to kill off the community project, right? And that happens all the time. You've got, but like maybe there's only 100 people there because maybe you're not getting something quite right. And look at the feedback and speak to that community. But at the same time, you've got to be prepared to be in it for a few years to really start to get some traction, I think, and then grow from there.
Yeah, I think to go to what you said, like the why is very important, right? Because if you're just wanting to have a community for the sake of it because it's the new trend, it would be shallow, and you're not gonna engage or get people galvanized around something if there's not a good reason for it. In your case, in our case, like the community was there to talk about a topic that was close to heart for everybody, and they then externalized the need for you to build the event. So the why was very clear. Those people wanted to discuss it. They wanted to be together. In our case, the people who want our software exists and they want to improve what we build. So I think for people who want to build a community, they need a real reason and why, what they want to participate with this community, because they're gonna receive a lot of, if they're successful in building the communities, they'll receive a lot of input. People want to know that they're participating on something for a reason. And I think then on that line, we can say a lot of good things about the community, but there's also as well sometimes bad experiences on the community, right? Once you invite people to your house, and then if your house is an open door, sometimes you're going to have guests there are not as polite or not follow. And I think especially on events, right? You have like a code of conduct and so on. Do you ever had a bad experience or someone like guidance on how to deal when things go wrong, and any tips?
Yeah. I mean, I think as you said, it always happens, right? We have a code of conduct on our Facebook group, but does everybody follow it? No, they don't, right? We ask for people not to do like self-promotional, push their companies, but people do, right? And if you've got the moderator there, then they can either message that person or delete that post and so on. But we don't always have that sort of resource there. Similarly, at the conferences, the people that come to our conference are part of the community. We have code of conduct. Again, we ask for people, especially we've seen like with the online conference that we use a platform and it's got the live chat on the side, and we just see some people just kind of pushing their product and promoting their product the whole time, and that's not the ethos or the spirit of SaaStock and why they're, and it annoys like I think most people, to be honest. So when we have to kind of politely sort of remind these guests that this is not what is expected, at SaaStock, and if they could please pull back from doing that. So yeah, we have these challenges. I think having a code of conduct, having these kind of rules, it certainly helps. I think people experiencing and being, contributors, within the event, you kind of develop, like we develop a sort of persona of people that are right for our community and who are not right for the community. And we generally then attract the sort of type of people that, that are in the community themselves. So, we get that kind of almost Me Too effect and so on. So generally we've been pretty lucky, but it does happen that you have these sort of like bad guests, and I think maybe over 5 years that we have probably ejected one person from the SaaStock community, so yeah, so that's not too bad.
No, not too bad at all. Like we have, because our community is all 100% online. We do have some meetups and sometimes, and it was amazing to meet some of those people face to face after talking to them online for so long. But again, our servers are so open that sometimes some people that should not be there get there, and gets less and less common. But it's something that people need to be aware they have to deal with. If they are going to create a community, they're gonna have to do the moderation. I think like I said, having the code of conduct, it's almost like a basic thing that you need to have. It's one of your starting points, so you can at least refer to when people cross the line. You say, okay, this was agreed for you to participate, and that's hard. Even the Linux community, the Linus Torvalds himself sometimes crossed the line, and it was for some period kind of he did. I don't think no one actually was brave enough to tell him to leave the community, but he received so much bad feedback that he was not following his own code of conduct that he left for a while. They're like, I'm gonna self-isolate, self-punish, and be away because I know I was not behaving as I expect from other people in the community to behave. So it's definitely a challenge. Do you guys have a name for the people who join the community? Like we call Rocketeers, the ones that are members of our community. I feel that once you give it a name, it's even easier to have a persona around, and it's a good tip for people. I wonder if you guys have something similar.
We call them SaaStockers, right? So I mean, people that work for SaaStockers, and people that join the community. We call them SaaStockers as well. So yeah, that's the name.
That's interesting. And so I don't know, we can talk about some other business types. Do you have seen any community that the most surprised you in the business model that you totally did not expect to have such a community? Because sometimes you think about some companies which are like maybe a type of an industry that you totally didn't expect that people galvanize around that product, and then got really surprised by it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't know. Nothing necessarily springs to mind in terms of surprising, but I mean, some like communities that obviously that I've seen that I think, or companies that have done really kind of well in building community. I mean, one obviously would be like Product Hunt. I think they have a great community. You know, they've had people since the start of like Product Hunt, you know, be moderators on Product Hunt and get people kind of bought in and seeing the value that it can be for you to be like a Product Hunt moderator. And then they ran, you know, a number of, and maybe they still are, you know, Product Hunt events, which used to have, you know, almost a bit like, sort of like cult-like celebrity sort of status that they had big queues around the blocks to try and get into a Product Hunt event. So pretty impressive. So whatever they're doing on community is something as a case study for people to kind of have a look at. Another company.
I think an early example is always like Stack Overflow has a little bit of this, right? So you have a reputation built into the system. So if the community becomes more recognized even externally by other people, I think, do you guys have a reputation system built maybe into your product? Because I think that can be quite effective on your business as well, right? Or...
Yeah. I mean, we don't, but it could. I mean, certainly we have a brand and we have a community, and we measure, you know, like word of mouth by, you know, NPS and so on. But yeah, I think it would be nice to kind of measure that better than what we have, you know, right now. But we do feel we do have a reputation, but just kind of measuring that is, you know, is a little bit challenging. And NPS is kind of one of the ways that we do it.
Yeah, I guess next steps are like gamification of this kind of things. Like for us, we have a little bit of gamification depending on how you contribute. You have the wall of fame of people who did big contributions for the community. People who are referenced in specific channels can become leaders on those channels for that type of topic. So for us, that kind of also helps people feel that they're being recognized for what they do. So I think I just got a nudge, like we're reaching the end of our conversation. It did fly by faster than I expected. So it's a topic that I love, and clearly you love as well, and you have a lot to talk about it. So, but if I can give you the last couple of minutes to give a summary for final tips for people building a community, and then you can close with that, so for people to have something to take home.
Yeah, sure. So I probably start with one persona, and you know, whether it's a founder or it's a marketer, etc. Kind of focus on that one persona initially. I think I would certainly have it in the mind that that you're in it for the long term, right? And I think also, you know, having that why, like you mentioned it kind of earlier, right? So it's not there, you know, having a bigger kind of purpose, like, and why are you doing it, right? Is it just because you want to make money, or are you passionate about building community, right? And I think people can kind of see through that, like if you're a real kind of community builder or not, right? And why you're doing it. And I think those that are successful are often those that really kind of want to build communities and are passionate about communities. So have you got the passion as well?
Well, that's really good tips, and I second all that you say. Again, thank you, Alexander, for sharing all this with us. I got very also interested in what you guys are launching. I think I'm waiting for the launch so I can give it a try, and definitely have some opinions that I would love to take from what you said and share and continue this conversation later as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.